worst might be yet to come, or for Governor Sarah Palin, there could be an epiphany of knowledge, a metaphorical lightning bolt of insight going through her, perhaps at tomorrow's debate. But in our third story in the countdown, no matter what is next, there will always be 6:45 Eastern Daylight Time on Wednesday, October 1st, 2008. The moment CBS News played a tape, a kind of smoking gun of stupidity, during which the Republican vice presidential candidate flatlined. In a segment in which both Mrs. Palin and Senator Biden were asked about Roe v. Wade and other Supreme Court rulings, the governor responded thoughtfully about her opposition, insisting the abortion issue should be left to the states. Then, asked if there is a right to privacy in the Constitution, she answered that she believed there was, and did not seem to even notice when Katie Couric interrupted to note that that right was the, quote, cornerstone of Roe v. Wade. Finally came the question and the answer that erased whatever had remained of Sarah Palin's credibility as a national political figure.
What other Supreme Court decisions do you disagree with?
Well, let's see. There's, of course, in the great history of America, there have been rulings that there's never going to be absolute consensus by every American, and there are those issues, again, like Roe v. Wade, where I believe are best held on a state level and addressed there. So, going through the history of America, there would be others, but...
Can you think of any?
Well, I would think of any, again, that could best be dealt with on a more local level. Maybe I would take issue with, but, as a mayor and then as a governor and even as a vice president, if I'm so privileged to serve, wouldn't be in a position of changing those things, but in supporting the law of the land as it reads today.
Everywhere like such as. Asked to name a Supreme Court verdict other than Roe v. Wade, she named Roe v. Wade. There was, of course, a sketch by the great comedians Bob Elliott and Ray Goulding in which a golf caddy was interviewed about the increasing popularity of her sport, and she began by saying that with increased leisure time, more people are finding they have leisure time and are looking for ways to utilize that leisure time to make sure that their leisure time is more enjoyable. Finally, the interviewer says, "We get the point, ma'am. We get the point, Governor." Despite tonight's latest TV train wreck, Sarah Palin, as a debater, at least in her campaign in Alaska, was not to be underestimated. The LA Times today reporting how after a string of bad 2006 gubernatorial campaign appearances attributed to a lack of attention span and an unwillingness to prepare, Palin developed workarounds, simple answers, and pithy comments delivered with a broad smile. She has a Reagan-like ability to win over audiences, but for someone who cares about issues and facts, it was rather startling to see her gloss over important questions, according to Andrew Halco, who ran against her. Meanwhile, last night, that same folksy and possibly gender-bending Palin submitted herself to right-wing radio talk show host Hugh Hewitt.
Oh, I think they're just not used to someone coming in from the outside saying, you know what, it's time that normal Joe Six-Pack American is finally represented in the position of vice presidency. And I think that that's kind of taken some people off guard, and they're out of sorts, and they're ticked off about it.
We're joined now by Huffington Post contributor James Moore. Jim, good evening.
Hi, Keith.
How over is it?
Well, I don't think it's quite over. You have to remember that being uninformed and even stupid doesn't disqualify you from holding public office in America. If it did, Congress wouldn't be a representative body, right? But on the other hand, I think Joe Biden can put an end to this tomorrow night. He could drain the last political lifeblood out of her. I'm a bit taken aback by all the analysts and the consultants who are suggesting he needs to be careful and cautious. I think he needs to use his intellect and his experience and his range and his depth to sort of beat her about her diminutive brain and let the world know that she is not up to this job, so that when that debate is over, everybody who's watching it asks the question, my God, what was John McCain thinking?
Yeah, something of a modernized version of Where's the Beef might work on that. But about that one answer, as was pointed out this afternoon on a couple of blogs, 2 months ago, the Supreme Court ruled on a case called Exxon v. Baker, which was the case that reduced the damages in the Exxon Valdez oil tanker disaster. It was in Alaska. I mean, Governor Palin, governor of Alaska, issued a statement at the time expressing disappointment over the ruling. It was in Alaska. She's already on the record as being disappointed and thus disapproving of this. It's supposedly her specialty, energy, and I might mention it was in Alaska. I mean, never mind Plessy v. Ferguson or Dred Scott. She didn't remember Exxon v. Baker.
So that was in Alaska.
Yeah.
Huh? So maybe what happened is she was sleeping in her tanning bed and John McCain woke her up and she said, what happened? I mean, I think we're dealing here with someone who is severely incurious and is intellectually incapable, as our current president is. From the first time I heard her struggle to answer a question, my memory was of George W. Bush and him trying to answer questions, and they took him back away from the public and fired him up and trained him a little bit and gave him those so-called glittering answers. But from the beginning, I've always thought of her as sort of George Bush in lip gloss and high heels. I don't think there's much difference between the two, except that George Bush might be smarter.
Oh, yeah. Now, thanks for sticking me with that image, by the way. But these local the local debates in Alaska, she was supposed to be terrific. At least she learned how to play it. If she came across tomorrow night like a cross between Winston Churchill and, to use her own term, Joe Sixpack, and what a bizarre term that was, in that debate tomorrow, could she make up for this just swing and a miss answer about the Supreme Court?
I think she's oblivious to the fact that Joe can't afford a six-pack anymore and he's down to a three-pack. But I don't think that she can do it. What she needs to do is deliver some kind of hybridized rhetoric between Pat Robertson and maybe Rush Limbaugh to fire up the people who are excited about her coming on board in the first place. And she clearly can't do that. And unfortunately for her, even if she could, in a debate, you have to have some depth on issues and substance, and I think that that's going to come out extremely glaringly tomorrow night, that she does not have a clue. And looking across the Bering Strait at Alaska doesn't make you an expert in foreign policy.
One last question, Jim. Palin's favorability among women, according to this CBS poll tonight, went from 47% to 30%. Is it really still the case that withdrawing her, I mean, tomorrow morning, before the debate, some pretext of family emergency, something that looked real good and absolutely necessary and unavoidable, would that not be less damaging than the prospect that she goes out there tomorrow and costs the Republican ticket 10 points in any chance of election?
I think you're describing a scenario where John McCain has sort of put himself out on a limb, and now he has to make a decision about whether he hangs out there and blows in the wind or he saws it off behind himself, because he's going to take a serious hit if he cuts her loose. It's going to reflect poorly on his judgment, and the only thing that could save him in that case from really losing it would be if he found somebody who really grabbed the public's attention, and that person clearly isn't out there. He wouldn't have chosen Sarah Palin.
James Moore, the noted political writer, co-author of Bush's Brain. As always, Jim, many thanks.